Welcome back to Revenge Vision. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy listening to today's story. Under the gray sky and biting drizzle of Louisville, the Coleman family gathered in a tense room. They laughed the moment the lawyer read the number. $10. 10 measly dollars for Travis Coleman, 34, while his younger brother walked away with $500,000. The room filled with that sharp, smug sound, the kind that always reminded Travis he was the glitch in the family photo. But attached to his bequest were just 4 words: he knows why. The laughter died when the lawyer turned to Travis, looked him straight in the eyes, and asked one question in front of everyone. Travis's answer shattered their confident smiles. Travis had once thought his grandmother's will was a cruel joke. $10 for him, $500,000 for his brother, and those 4 chilling words. Then the lawyer asked the question that changed everything. One word from Travis flipped their world. If you're tuning in from Louisville, Kentucky, or anywhere across America, drop a comment with your city. I love seeing how far these revenge stories travel. Hit like, subscribe to the channel for more family drama, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next twist. 2 weeks earlier, under the cold drizzle of Louisville, Travis drove his rental car to the local funeral home to say goodbye to his grandmother, Betty. One last time. The flight from Chicago had been short, but heavy with silence. Travis landed at Muhammad Ali International Airport, picked up a compact rental car, and followed the wet roads toward the funeral home in the Highlands neighborhood. Rain streaked the windshield wipers, moving in steady rhythm against the persistent mist. He parked in the crowded lot and stepped out into the chill collar turned up against the wind that carried the scent of wet leaves and distant wood smoke. Inside, the air was thick with lilies and polished oak. The service was understated, just as Grandma Betty had always preferred short prayers. Fresh flowers arranged simply a handful of old friends from the community seated quietly. Travis stood near the back coat, still on watching the family he had distanced himself from years ago. His father, Keith Coleman, stood at the front, shaking hands with local business acquaintances, his face composed into practiced solemnity. His mother, Janet Coleman, sat in the first row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though no tears actually fell. His younger brother, Gavin Coleman, occupied the prime seat beside her phone, held low in his lap, probably already framing the moment for social media. No one greeted Travis when he entered. Keith glanced once in his direction, then turned away as if recognizing an unwelcome guest. Janet's eyes lifted, briefly met his for half a second, and slid past like he was a shadow on the wall. Gavin noticed him offered a quick smirk that never reached his eyes, and returned to his screen. Travis moved to a side aisle and sat alone. The organ music played softly, filling the space between people who had long since run out of things to say to one another. He watched the polished mahogany casket, smaller than he remembered Grandma Betty being in life. She had always seemed larger than any room she entered, sharp-eyed, unyielding, the only one who ever looked at him without expectation. The minister spoke of her generosity, her love for the community, her quiet strength. No one mentioned the arguments, the silences, the way she had quietly supported Travis when no one else would. He sat through it all, coat damp from the rain, feeling the familiar weight of being the outsider in his own family. When the service ended, people drifted toward the reception area for coffee and murmured conversations. Travis stayed behind a moment longer, standing beside the casket. The lid was closed as she had requested. He placed a hand on the cool wood, the same hand that had once held hers during those rare afternoons in her kitchen, when she taught him to trust numbers over promises. Standing beside his grandmother, Betty Coleman's casket, Travis felt the past rush back to the childhood years in the suburban house on the outskirts of Louisville. The Coleman home in the Highlands neighborhood had always been a showcase of quiet success. Wide lawn, brick facade, garage full of cars that Keith polished every weekend. Inside, however, the rules were clear from the beginning. Gavin received the attention and the rewards. When Gavin wanted a new bicycle at 8, it appeared the next week. When he struggled in school, tutors arrived without question. Keith and Janet Coleman saw their younger son as the future of the family name, bright, easy to display at local events. Travis grew up in the background. His father often said he needed to build character, which meant public school, instead of private academy hand-me-down clothes and summers working odd jobs around the neighborhood. Janet would sigh when Travis asked questions about the family business or the charity foundation they ran, telling him not to worry about adult matters. The message was constant. Gavin was the asset, Travis was the one who needed to prove himself. By 16, Travis had learned to rely on himself. He earned straight A's through sheer determination, applied for every scholarship available, and left for college in Chicago on a full ride. No family money, no farewell party, just a quiet goodbye at the airport, where Keith shook his hand like a business acquaintance, and Janet gave him a brief hug. Gavin, then 12, had waved from the car without looking up from his phone. The distance grew after that. Travis built a life in Chicago as a financial auditor, reviewing company books for discrepancies, finding patterns others missed. He rarely came home, and when he did, the visits were short and formal. Phone calls with his parents were brief updates, conversations with Gavin even shorter. Then, a few weeks before Grandma Betty passed, she called him. The ring came late at night, the Louisville area code pulling him out of sleep. Her voice was weaker than he remembered, but still sharp. She asked him to come alone. No questions, no telling anyone. Travis booked the flight the next morning. He met her at a small diner on the edge of town, the kind with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the 1980s. Grandma Betty sat in the corner booth coat, buttoned to her chin, a plain envelope, and a brass key on the table between them. She looked smaller than he recalled, but her eyes were the same, clear and unyielding. She pushed the items toward him without preamble. "Take these," she said. "Keep them safe. Don't open the envelope until I'm gone." Travis reached for them, fingers brushing the cold metal of the key. "What is this about Grandma?" She leaned forward, voice low. "Your father and mother have been using the family foundation for their own purposes. Gavin knows, and he's part of it. They think they've hidden everything, but numbers don't lie. You understand numbers." Travis felt the weight of the key in his palm. "Why me?" "Because you left," she answered simply. "You didn't take their money. You didn't stay for the easy life. That makes you the only one I trust." She slid the envelope closer. "Rate it when the time comes. And Travis, be careful. They'll try to stop you." He nodded, slipping both items into his coat pocket. Grandma Betty watched him for a long moment, then reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It was the first time she had done that in years. "You were always the strong one," she said quietly. "Don't let them change that." Travis left the diner first, as she instructed. He drove back to his hotel under a darkening sky, the key heavy against his chest. The envelope remained sealed, but he already knew it held the truth his family had spent years trying to bury. After the funeral, during the 2 weeks waiting for the will reading, Travis returned to his hotel near the airport and opened the documents his grandmother had left him. The room was small and dimly lit, the kind of place that smelled faintly of old carpet and instant coffee. Travis sat on the edge of the bed, laptop balanced on his knees, the envelope from Grandma Betty resting beside him. He had carried it with him since the diner meeting, sealed as promised, but the brass key and the accompanying papers were already in his possession. He started with the folder she had handed him, quietly labeled simply with her initials. The first few pages were standard foundation records, annual reports for the Coleman Family Foundation, a small charity focused on local education and community programs in Louisville. Travis had heard about it growing up. It was the kind of organization that hosted fundraisers at country clubs and issued glossy newsletters. But as he scrolled deeper, the numbers began to shift. A series of grants stood out immediately. One entry showed a transfer of $75,000 to an organization called Riverbank Consulting for Educational Outreach. The name was unfamiliar. Travis cross-referenced the address and found it led to a mailbox in a strip mall on the east side of town. Another grant this time, $90,000, went to Horizon Partners for community development. Same pattern, no website, no phone number, just a registered agent in Delaware. He opened the foundation's disbursement logs next. The transfers were approved by his mother, Janet Coleman, who signed off as treasurer. The timestamps were odd, late nights, early mornings, weekends when no one else was supposed to be working. Attached to some rejections were notes in her handwriting, vendor name too similar to known political entity change LLC, and resubmit. The precision was chilling. She wasn't just signing papers, she was orchestrating the flow. Travis leaned back against the headboard, rubbing his eyes. The foundation was tax-exempt, required to distribute at least 5% of its assets annually to maintain status. On paper, it looked clean donations to local schools, youth programs, a few scholarships. But the outliers were deliberate. Money flowed out to Shells, stayed for 48 hours, then moved again as consulting fees to a company registered to Gavin Coleman. The business was called Apex Strategies, a vague consulting firm that claimed to help nonprofits with branding and outreach. Travis pulled up the state records. Apex had no employees listed beyond Gavin, no office address beyond a P.O. box, and revenue that matched the foundation grants almost exactly. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. This was structured. The money left the tax-exempt foundation, cycled through Shells, and landed in Gavin's company as legitimate income. From there, it could be spent on anything cars, travel, lifestyle, offset by business expenses. The foundation stayed compliant on the surface, but the cash was being siphoned. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number encrypted through a secure app. The sender had used a temporary ID, but the content was unmistakable. Check the attached spreadsheet. Look at line 47. Routing numbers don't match public records. Keep this quiet. Travis opened the file. It was a detailed ledger highlighting specific transfers from the foundation to Apex. The routing numbers led to accounts in Gavin's name with timestamps matching the foundation approvals. The sender had included screenshots of bank statements and a note, "Your cousin Easton Fox. I work at a local branch. Saw the patterns? Couldn't stay silent." Travis stared at the screen. Easton had taken a risk sending this. If discovered, it could cost him his job. But the evidence was solid. Combined with Grandma Betty's documents, it painted a clear picture. Keith and Janet had turned the family foundation into a personal fund, using Gavin as the front. The charity's mission was just cover. He saved the files to an encrypted drive, then backed them up to a secure cloud folder. The envelope from Grandma Betty remained sealed on the bed beside him. He knew what it contained would confirm everything, but he waited. The 2 weeks until the will reading stretched ahead, each day heavier than the last. Travis closed the laptop and stood by the window watching the rain streak down the glass. The foundation had been his grandmother's legacy. Now it was the weapon she had handed him to reclaim the truth. During the 2 weeks waiting for the will, reading the cold in Louisville remained unrelenting, and Travis's hotel room became a quiet prison of anticipation. The phone rang late one evening while he sat reviewing notes on his laptop. The caller ID showed Gavin's number. Travis let it ring twice before answering, keeping his voice even. "Hey, big brother," Gavin said, tone light but edged with something forced. "How you holding up after the funeral? Mom and Dad are still a mess. They keep asking if you're okay." Travis leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. "I'm fine. What do you need?" Gavin hesitated, the pause too long to be casual. "Look, I know things are weird between us, but Grandma left some stuff right. Papers may be a key. Mom's worried you might have something that belongs to the family. She just wants to make sure everything's handled properly." Travis felt the old anger stir, but he kept it buried. If there's anything, the lawyer will sort it out. "Come on, Travis. We're family. You don't have to play games. If you've got something from Grandma, just tell me. We can figure it out together." The line went quiet for a moment. Travis could hear Gavin breathing, waiting for him to crack. Instead, he ended the call without another word. He set the phone down and opened his email. A new message had arrived from an anonymous account subject line blank. Inside was a single photo attachment, a grainy shot of the hallway outside Grandma Betty's study at the old house. A small black device was mounted high on the wall lens pointed directly at the door. The timestamp on the image matched the week after the funeral. Someone had installed a camera recently. Travis stared at the photo. The device was small, professional grade, the kind used for home security but positioned to watch the study entrance. He remembered Grandma Betty's insistence on privacy in that room. She had always kept the door locked when she worked. Now it made sense they were waiting for him to go looking to give them evidence of theft or tampering. He saved the photo to his encrypted drive and opened his work email next. A message from his supervisor in Chicago had arrived that afternoon. Travis, we received an anonymous tip about your conduct. Attached is a photo that raises concerns. Please explain. The attachment showed an old picture of Travis at a college party, eyes half closed, head tilted back with what looked like white powder on the table in front of him. He recognized the image immediately. It was from his 21st birthday. But the powder was edited in. The lighting matched, the shadows were perfect, but the compression artifacts around the substance were obvious to anyone who knew digital forensics. Travis forwarded the email to his personal account and ran a quick analysis on his laptop. The heat map lit up around the edited area. It was a good fake, but not good enough. Someone had spent time on it, someone with access to old photos and motivation to discredit him. He closed the laptop and stood by the window. The rain had picked up, drumming steadily against the glass. The family wasn't waiting for the will reading. They were already moving, trying to paint him as unstable, unreliable, someone whose word wouldn't hold up if he spoke against them. Travis paced the room. The 2 weeks felt longer than ever. He knew the reading would be the turning point, but the pressure was building now. Every day brought another attempt to undermine him, another call, another rumor, another fabricated story. He sat back down and opened his secure folder again. The documents from Grandma Betty were still there, untouched, except for the foundation records he had already studied. The envelope remained sealed. He resisted the urge to open it early. She had asked him to wait, and he would honor that. The phone stayed silent for the rest of the night. Travis didn't sleep much. He spent the hours reviewing every detail he had collected, building the case in his mind. The camera, the fake photo, the probing call from Gavin, they were all pieces of the same strategy. They wanted him quiet, discredited, out of the way. But Travis had learned long ago that silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. A few days before the will reading, Travis drove to First National Bank in downtown Louisville, the streets still damp from overnight rain. He arrived early, parking the rental car in the underground garage, where the air was cooler and quieter than the city above. The bank lobby smelled of polished marble and fresh coffee. Travis approached the safety deposit desk, showed his ID, and produced the brass key Grandma Betty had given him weeks earlier. The clerk led him to the vault without asking questions, as if this kind of visit was routine. The vault door opened with a heavy click. Rows of metal boxes lined the walls, each one numbered. Travis located box 47, the number etched on the key. The clerk inserted the master key on one side. Travis turned his on the other. The mechanism released with a soft thud, and the clerk pulled the long metal cassette out, placing it on a private table in a small viewing room. "Take your time," the clerk said, closing the door behind him. Travis sat alone under the bright fluorescent light. He lifted the lid slowly, half expecting disappointment. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter in Grandma Betty's familiar script, a leather-bound ledger, and a small USB drive. He opened the letter first. The paper was thick, the ink steady, despite her age. "Travis, if you're reading this, you've used the key. That means the time has come. I knew your family would try to keep you away, but I also knew you wouldn't let them. The ledger shows what I've done over the years. I set up a blind trust for you alone, $500,000 invested quietly, since you left for Chicago. It's yours, no strings, no one else knows. The foundation was my legacy, but I couldn't stop what they did to it. They used it for themselves, and Gavin helped. The USB has the proof transaction logs, emails, approvals they thought were hidden. Use it when the moment is right. Don't let anger guide you. Let the truth do the work. You were the only one who earned my trust by walking away. Don't come back for them. Come back for yourself. Grandma Betty Travis read it twice, the words settling like stones in his chest. He set the letter aside and opened the ledger. Pages filled with neat columns, dates, amounts, account numbers. The trust had started small monthly transfers from her personal investments, but compounded steadily over 15 years. $500,000 now sat in a secure account, untouched, waiting for him. The USB contained more. He plugged it into his laptop and opened the folder. Files organized by year 2010 to 2025. Wire transfers from the Coleman Family Foundation to shell companies, then to Apex Strategies. Emails from Janet to Gavin confirming consulting fees. Bank statements showing the money cycling back into personal accounts. Everything was time-stamped, documented, irrefutable. Travis sat back. The evidence was overwhelming. Grandma Betty hadn't just suspected. She had tracked every move for years. She had protected the truth in the only way she knew how, quietly, methodically, until someone she trusted could use it. He copied the files to his encrypted drive, then backed them up again to a secure cloud. The letter went into his wallet, the ledger into his bag. The key stayed in his pocket, a small, cold reminder of what was coming. Travis left the viewing room and returned the cassette to the clerk. Outside, the streets of downtown Louisville were quiet, the rain holding off for the first time in days. He got into the rental car and drove back to the hotel, the weight of the documents heavier than before. The reading was only days away. He was ready. 2 weeks after the funeral, the day of the will reading arrived, and Travis stepped into Rebecca Fox's law office under the gray sky of Louisville. The conference room was small and formal, with dark wood paneling and a long table that seated 6. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown, but the view was lost behind heavy rain clouds. Rebecca Fox stood at the head of the table, portfolio open in front of her. Keith and Janet Coleman sat on one side, Keith in a pressed suit, Janet with her hands folded tightly. Gavin was across from them, leaning back, already wearing the satisfied expression of someone who believed the outcome was decided. Travis took the seat opposite Rebecca. No one spoke to him when he entered. Keith glanced up briefly, then looked away. Janet adjusted her scarf. Gavin offered a small nod, more acknowledgement than welcome. Rebecca cleared her throat and began. This is the last will and testament of Betty Coleman, dated 3 weeks before her passing. I will read the specific bequests. She paused, letting the room settle. To my grandson Gavin Coleman, I leave $500,000 in cash to be distributed immediately upon signing the standard waiver. Gavin smiled openly. Keith nodded with approval. Janet exhaled softly. To my grandson Travis Coleman, I leave $10. The room erupted in quiet laughter. Keith chuckled, first low and satisfied. Janet covered her mouth, eyes sparkling with amusement. Gavin leaned forward, shaking his head, as if it were the punchline to a long joke. $10, Keith repeated, voice carrying. She always had a sense of humor. Rebecca continued without expression. Attached to Mr. Travis Coleman's bequest is a note from the testator. He knows why. The laughter lingered a moment longer, then faded as Rebecca turned to Travis. She met his eyes directly. Mr. Coleman, she said, voice steady. Do you consent to activate the sealed codicil to your grandmother's will? The room went still. Keith's smile froze. Janet's hand dropped from her mouth. Gavin sat up straight, confusion replacing amusement. Travis looked at Rebecca, then at his family. He saw the calculation in their eyes, the sudden uncertainty. He had waited years for this moment, not for revenge, but for truth. "Yes," he said. Rebecca nodded once. She opened a second section of the portfolio and placed a document on the table. This codicil appoints Travis Coleman as the sole trustee of a blind trust established by Betty Coleman. The trust holds voting shares in the family foundation and controls the disbursement of remaining assets. As trustee, Mr. Coleman has the authority to freeze all distributions, including the $500,000 to Gavin Coleman, pending a full forensic audit of the Coleman Family Foundation. Keith stood up. "This is ridiculous. The will is clear. He gets $10. Rebecca did not flinch. The $10 was legal consideration to establish the contract. By accepting it, Mr. Travis Coleman becomes the executor of the trust. The codicil was sealed and conditional. His consent activates it now." Gavin's face drained of color. "Wait, what does that mean?" "It means Rebecca said the $500,000 you were about to receive is frozen. The foundation's books will be audited. If irregularities are found, the entire distribution may be invalidated." Janet reached for Keith's arm. "This can't be right." Betty wasn't in her right mind at the end. Rebecca slid another document across the table. The codicil includes a physician's affidavit confirming Betty Coleman's mental capacity at the time of signing. It also contains instructions to notify the IRS if any beneficiary contests the trust. Keith stared at the paper. "You set us up." Travis spoke for the first time since his answer. "Grandma set it up. I just said yes." The room fell silent, except for the rain against the windows. Rebecca gathered her papers. "The audit will begin immediately. Mr. Coleman, as trustee, you have full access to the records. The rest of you will be notified of next steps." Gavin looked at Travis, eyes wide. "You can't do this." Travis met his brother's gaze. "I already did." Keith turned to Rebecca. "We'll contest this. We'll tie it up in court for years." "You can try," Rebecca replied. "But the codicil is ironclad, and the evidence is already in Mr. Coleman's possession." Travis stood. He didn't look at his parents or his brother. He simply walked out of the room, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. Outside, the rain had eased to a light mist. Travis got into the rental car and started the engine. The 2 weeks of waiting were over. The truth was no longer hidden. Travis left the law office without looking back. The rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks slick and reflective under the yellow lamps. He walked to the rental car, started the engine, and drove straight to the airport. The flight back to Chicago was booked for that evening. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to wait for. In the days that followed, the IRS opened an investigation into the Coleman Family Foundation. Rebecca Fox forwarded the evidence from the sealed codicil transaction logs, approval notes, bank records, and the encrypted files from Easton. The agency moved quickly. Within a week, agents arrived at the family home in the Highlands, requesting access to all financial records. The foundation's tax-exempt status was immediately frozen pending review. Keith and Janet received the first notice of proposed penalties. The IRS determined that the grants to shell companies violated Section 4958 of the Internal Revenue Code excess benefit transactions involving disqualified persons. The penalties were substantial excise taxes on the self-dealing amounts, plus back taxes on the misdirected funds. The total fine exceeded $300,000, and the couple was barred from serving as officers or directors of any nonprofit for 5 years. Their local reputation, built over decades of community involvement, crumbled. Friends from the country club stopped returning calls. The Chamber of Commerce quietly removed Keith's name from its board. Gavin faced the hardest blow. The $500,000 he had anticipated was never disbursed. The codicil's trust clause allowed Travis, as sole trustee, to withhold all distributions until the audit concluded. When the IRS confirmed the lamb dung, the funds were clawed back into the foundation for legitimate use. Gavin's consulting firm, Apex Strategies, lost its primary revenue source. The company folded within months, leaving him with mounting debts and no safety net. He tried to contest the decision, but the codicil was airtight. His social media presence, once filled with luxury posts, turned silent. Travis watched from Chicago. He didn't gloat. He simply followed the process. The blind trust Grandma Betty had established remained intact, $500,000 in a secure account growing quietly. He used a portion to cover legal fees and donated the rest to local education programs in Louisville, the kind his grandmother had originally intended. He never contacted his parents or Gavin again. The family line ended there, clean and final. The story spread quietly through Louisville's tight-knit circles. People who had known the Colemans for years whispered about the fall from grace. The foundation survived restructured under new leadership. Travis's name rarely came up, but when it did, it was with a nod of quiet respect. In the end, greed had dismantled what generations had built. It turned a family into strangers, a legacy into a liability. But honesty, patient, deliberate, and unyielding, had preserved the one thing worth keeping: the truth. Thank you so much for listening to the entire story. Greed can destroy families, but integrity always brings justice in the end. I truly appreciate every one of you who stayed until the last word. What do you think about Travis's choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.